The math and the writing sections are quite obvious as to what they're testing, right? There's a math in school and you do writing in classes. Whereas critical reading, it's not clear on the surface what that is. So what is critical reading? Well, it's probably best to oppose it to what we could call non-critical reading. So non-critical reading first is passive. What I mean by that is if you're reading non-critically, let's say you're reading a blog or a magazine or something, you're just kind of sitting there and you're kind of enjoying it. And if something's funny, you laugh, but you're not really engaging with it. You're not really doing anything with it. You're just kind of sitting there like you're watching a movie. Whereas critical reading is active. You're asking questions of it. You're underlining. You're trying to relate it to other things that you're reading or thinking about. So you're doing something with it. It's being active. Non-critical reading is really mostly concerned with the facts. What are the facts? What is true? Right, what does this passage say? It really pretty much takes what the passage says on face value, whatever it is you're reading. Whereas a critical reader would not only, of course, be interested in what is being said, that's, of course, critical and the foundation for everything, but how it's being said, so the techniques that are being used, rhetorical, literary devices, those kinds of issues, and then why it's being said, so what it means, right? So who cares that we were reading this, right? So a non-critical reader is only caring about the facts and what it says, whereas the critical reader wants to know not only what it says, but what it does and what it means. A non-critical reader is gullible, so sounds kind of negative, but basically if you're reading a newspaper story or you're reading a blog post or a magazine and you're reading it non-critically, you're generally going to accept whatever it is that the author is saying on face value, right? If you're just concerned with the facts, you're not really concerned with challenging those facts, you're just going to more or less believe what the author is saying. Whereas a critical reader is more skeptical. Doesn't mean you think that anyone you read is lying. It's just you always want to know, how did the author know this? How is the author arguing this? Is this actually true? What are the assumptions? Questions like that. So you're skeptical. You can eventually accept what they're saying is true, but you just don't, off the bat, say, oh, yes, I believe everything you say. And finally, non-critical reading is reactive. In other words, like I mentioned before, if something's funny, you laugh. If something makes you sad, you cry. But you don't actually doing anything with it. Whereas in critical reading, you're being purposeful. You're not just reacting, you are acting. You want to know, what is this text saying? How does it relate? How could I answer questions with it? All those kinds of issues. So non-critical reading, or critical reading, can be really summarized by these three issues. The critical reader wants to know what the text says, what the text does, and what the text means. And I'm going to be referencing this a lot throughout the series. And finally, you can also break this down into a non-critical reader skims and a critical reader does close reading. And I'm actually going to have a video in a couple videos from now about this issue of skimming versus close reading. Now, to sum up, I think what critical reading is ultimately. Critical reading is reading with a purpose. You are reading for a reason. And it's not a reason beyond, I want to have fun or for pleasure. It's reading to answer questions, to figure something out, to really engage with the text in a really meaningful way. And luckily for us, the purpose is given to us. In real life, it's a really open book, so to speak. But for the SAT, it's very, very narrowly defined. Your purpose is to answer particular questions they've given you, and that actually helps us out immensely. In the next video, I'm going to go through basically just a fun little critical reading of two passages so you can kind of see what that looks like. In the video after that, I'm going to talk more about skimming.